Welcome back to RetroQuest, I'm Jay, and thanks for joining me as we look up Earthworm Jim 3D on the Nintendo 64.
Groovy!
If you're a fan of weird and wacky gaming experiences from the late 90s, then this game is sure to spark some nostalgia. Let's not waste any more time, let's get this into the console and get started.
Earthworm Jim!
The soil he did crawl.
Earthworm Jim!
A super suit did fall. Jim was just a dirt-eating, chewy length of worm flesh, but all that came to a crashing end.
Released in 1999, Earthworm Jim 3D was a bold leap into the third dimension for one of the most beloved and surreal characters from the 16-bit era, Earthworm Jim. Originally making a name for himself on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo in the mid-90s, Jim's absurd sense of humour and quirky gameplay made him an instant hit. But how did his transition to 3D stack up against the already crowded platformer landscape of the N64? Earthworm Jim 3D was developed by Viz Entertainment and published by Interplay Entertainment. The game belongs to the 3D platformer genre, an incredibly competitive category on the Nintendo 64, with Super Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64 already establishing high standards. Jim's shift from 2D side-scroller to 3D platformer represented a major change for the series, reflecting a larger industry trend during the late 90s, as developers embraced new technology. Initially planned for release on multiple systems, the game eventually became exclusive to the N64 and PC. Released in 1999, Earthworm Jim 3D stood out with its signature blend of absurdist humour and surreal world design, featuring bizarre enemies and environments that could only exist within the mind of Earthworm Jim. The game tried to retain the personality of its predecessors, but with the added challenge of reinterpreting that unique charm in a 3D space. However, the transition wasn't exactly smooth. In typical Earthworm Jim fashion, the story is both whimsical and nonsensical. Jim, our titular hero, is injured by a cow falling from the sky, which if you've played previous games is very on brand. The impact causes Jim to suffer a mental breakdown, and the entirety of the game takes place inside his mind. Players are tasked with helping Jim to regain control of his fractured psyche by exploring 4 different regions of his brain: memory, imagination, fear and happiness. Each area is filled with enemies, absurd characters that embody these mental states. Key characters in the game include Psychro, one of Jim's longtime nemesis, who makes a return as an antagonist in Jim's mental turmoil. Jim's mental state is also personified by his sidekick Peter Puppy, and players encounter various bizarre personalities throughout the levels that reflect the internal chaos Jim is facing. There's no conventional narrative progression, but instead the story is a loose framework for the comedic and bizarre adventures that define Earthworm Jim as a franchise. Even the game's premise, an earthworm with a superhero suit trying to collect marbles inside his brain, perfectly reflects the series' signature absurdity. Earthworm Jim 3D follows the traditional 3D platformer formula that was popular on the N64. The gameplay consists of collecting golden udders, a fittingly odd item in a true Earthworm Jim fashion, which are required to unlock new areas in Jim's mind. Players must explore the 4 mental worlds, completing various platform challenges, defeating enemies and solving puzzles. Throughout each area, Jim's iconic plasma gun makes a return, allowing him to blast his enemies as he jumps, climbs and explores. Although Earthworm Jim 3D brings the familiar humour of the series into a 3D world, it struggled with some of the technical aspects of that transition. The controls, especially the camera, were often criticised for being awkward and unresponsive, making platforming more frustrating than it should have been. Combat also took a backseat to exploration, which disappointed some long-time fans who were used to the fast-paced, action-heavy nature of the 2D games. On the positive side, the game introduced some unique ideas, such as its use of Jim's various mental states to differentiate the levels. Each world has its own distinct theme and aesthetic, which helped to create a sense of variety. The enemy designs and quirky level names remain true to the series' absurdist humour, with plenty of visual gags and oddities scattered throughout. However, Earthworm Jim 3D didn't innovate or expand the platforming genre the way its 2D predecessors had with the side-scrolling genre. The development of Earthworm Jim 3D was long and tumultuous. Starting shortly after the release of Earthworm Jim 2 in 1995, originally envisaged as a groundbreaking 3D title, the game encountered numerous delays and changes in direction due to development challenges. One of the biggest factors in the game's troubled production was its switch between multiple developers. Initially, it was being worked on by the now defunct company Viz Entertainment, but development dragged on for so long that the game missed its original release window of 1998. The transition from 2D to 3D also posed several creative challenges. The original creators of Earthworm Jim, Doug TenNapel, and the team at Shiny Entertainment were not involved in the production of Earthworm Jim 3D, which may explain why it lacked some of the refined polish of the first two games. Moreover, with increasing pressure from the competition, including games like Banjo-Kazooie and Super Mario 64, Earthworm Jim 3D had to undergo numerous changes to keep up with the evolving expectations of gamers. Budget constraints and the technical limitations of the N64 hardware further complicated the process, resulting in a game that, while brimming with ambition, felt rushed in certain areas. Upon release, Earthworm Jim 3D was met with mixed to negative reviews. While some fans appreciated the effort to bring Jim into the third dimension, many critics felt the game failed to live up to the legacy of its 2D predecessors. The humour and quirky design was still there, but the game's poor controls, awkward camera, and general lack of polish hampered the overall experience. Reviewers from outlets like IGN and GameSpot were quick to point out the game's technical shortcomings. IGN's review at the time cited the tedious gameplay and frustrating camera controls as significant issues.
Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, GameSpot was equally critical, noting that Earthworm Jim 3D lacks the charm and fun that made the earlier games in the series so special. On Metacritic, the game holds a mediocre score of 58, reflecting its overall reception by critics and players alike. Despite these issues, the game still holds a certain nostalgic appeal for fans of the franchise, and it's found a small cult following among retro game enthusiasts. Unfortunately, Earthworm Jim 3D didn't win any major awards, and it failed to make a significant impact on the N64's crowded platforming scene. Earthworm Jim 3D was the last major entry in the series for a long time. After its release, the Earthworm Jim franchise largely went dormant, with only a few minor appearances and ports on other systems. There were several attempts to reboot the series over the years, but none of them managed to gain much traction. A high-definition remake of the original Earthworm Jim was released in 2010 for various platforms, bringing back the classic 2D gameplay that fans loved. However, no direct sequel to Earthworm Jim 3D was ever made. There were rumours of a new Earthworm Jim game in development for the Intellivision Amico, a new console set to be released in the 2020s, but as of now, the future of the franchise remains uncertain. Given the character's enduring popularity, there's always hope that Earthworm Jim will once again crawl out of the dirt and into the spotlight. To wrap things up, Earthworm Jim 3D was an ambitious but ultimately flawed attempt to bring a beloved 2D character into the world of 3D platformers. While it retained the trademark humour and weirdness of the original games, its technical issues and uninspired gameplay mechanics kept it from reaching the heights of its predecessors. Nevertheless, it remains a fascinating artefact of the late 90s gaming landscape, a time when many developers were experimenting with 3D for the first time. I will always retain a fondness for the character and world of Earthworm Jim. Growing up, I loved the 2D games and was a big fan of the bonkers cartoon series, which to this day I don't think gets enough love. This 3D adventure though was a letdown, and having never owned it back in the day, I don't think it's one I'll be going back to over and over again. It will sit alongside my Earthworm Jim memorabilia on display while I wait and hope for a 2D sequel sometime in the future. Now I'd love to hear from you. What are your memories of Earthworm Jim 3D? Did you play it back in the day? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this deep dive into retro gaming history. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.